Writing effective environmental reports, a professional development workshop. Dr. Sophia Chen, a communication specialist, is leading a session on environmental report writing. Participants include environmental professionals from various industries.
Welcome everyone to our workshop on writing effective environmental reports. Before we dive into specific techniques, I'd like to start with a question. What challenges have you faced when writing environmental reports for different audiences?
My biggest challenge is technical complexity. Our environmental monitoring generates highly technical data that's difficult to explain to non-specialist audiences, especially senior management.
For me, it's balancing detail with readability. If I include all the technical details, the report becomes overwhelming. If I simplify too much, we risk omitting important information.
Those are excellent points. Technical complexity and finding the right level of detail are common challenges. Anyone else?
I struggle with addressing multiple audiences in the same report. Regulators want specific technical details, management wants business implications, and the public wants simple explanations of environmental impacts.
That's a critical challenge, the multi-audience problem. Environmental reports often need to serve different readers with different needs. Let's use these challenges as a framework for our discussion today.
First, let's talk about the fundamental purpose of environmental reports. While formats vary widely, from compliance reports to impact assessments to sustainability disclosures, all environmental reports share certain core functions. They document environmental conditions, impacts, or performance. They demonstrate compliance with requirements or standards. They inform decisions about environmental management. They communicate environmental commitment to stakeholders. The effectiveness of any environmental report depends on how well it fulfills these functions for its intended audiences. If we had focused only on data compilation without considering these purposes, we would have missed the true goal of environmental reporting.
That's exactly what happens in my organization. We collect enormous amounts of data, but our reports often don't connect that data to decisions or actions.
That's a common issue. Let's talk about how to address it through effective report structure and content selection.
The first step is audience analysis. Before writing a single word, you need to identify who will read this report. What do they already know about the subject? What do they need to know? What will they do with the information? What questions or concerns might they have? If you had conducted this analysis for every report, you would have made very different content and structure decisions.
But what if, as mentioned earlier, we have multiple audiences with different needs?
Excellent question. For multi-audience reports, you need a layered structure that allows different readers to find what they need efficiently. The most effective approach typically includes 1. An executive summary that provides key findings, conclusions, and recommendations for decision makers. 2. A main report body with clearly marked sections addressing different aspects of the subject. Third, technical appendices containing detailed data, methodologies, and specialized analyses. This layered approach allows executives to get what they need from the summary, while technical specialists can dive into the appendices for detailed information. Now, let's discuss specific techniques for making environmental reports more effective, starting with the executive summary. The executive summary is arguably the most important part of any environmental report. For many readers, particularly senior decision makers, it may be the only part they read thoroughly. An effective executive summary should be brief, typically 5 to 10% of the total report length. Stand alone as a complete mini-document. Present key findings, conclusions, and recommendations. Highlight significant data without overwhelming detail. Use accessible language even for technical subjects.
How detailed should the methodology section be in the executive summary?
Generally, the executive summary should mention methodology very briefly. focusing on credibility rather than detail. For example, conclusions are based on 12 months of continuous monitoring using EPA-approved methods, rather than describing specific sampling protocols. The detailed methodology belongs in the main report or appendices.
Moving to the main report body, organisation is crucial. Environmental reports should follow a logical structure that helps readers navigate complex information. While the exact structure depends on the report type, most effective environmental reports include clear introduction stating purpose, scope, and context. Methodology section explaining how data was collected and analysed. Results presented logically, often from most to least significant. Discussion interpreting results and explaining implications. Conclusions answering the key questions that prompted the report. Recommendations, if appropriate, for actions based on findings.
You mentioned organizing results from most to least significant. But in environmental compliance reports, aren't we often required to follow a specific structure defined by regulations?
Yes, regulatory reports often have prescribed formats that must be followed. In those cases, you should adhere to the required structure. However, even within those constraints, you can use subheadings, emphasis, and cross-references to help readers navigate the information. If the regulatory format buries important information, you might create an additional key findings section early in the report.
Now let's address one of the most challenging aspects of environmental reports, presenting technical data effectively. Environmental professionals often work with complex datasets that can be difficult for non-specialists to interpret. The key principle here is to present data in context. Raw numbers mean little to most readers without appropriate context. For each significant data point, consider providing comparison to regulatory standards or internal targets, historical trends showing change over time, benchmarks against industry averages or best practices, explanation of significance and implications.
That's helpful, but how do we handle very large data sets? We sometimes have hundreds of monitoring points and parameters.
For large datasets, effective summarization and visualization are essential. Rather than presenting every data point, focus on parameters that exceed or approach thresholds, significant trends or patterns, unexpected or anomalous results, representative samples that illustrate broader patterns. Visual elements are particularly valuable for making complex data accessible. If we had relied solely on text and tables in environmental reports, we would have missed powerful opportunities to enhance understanding through visualization. Effective visualizations for environmental data include trend graphs showing changes over time, comparison charts relating results to standards or targets, maps showing spatial distribution of impacts or conditions, process diagrams illustrating environmental aspects, photographs documenting conditions or practices.
How do we balance technical accuracy with readability when explaining complex environmental concepts?
That's the central challenge of environmental communication. Here are some techniques that help bridge the gap. First, layer your explanations. Start with a simple overview, then add technical detail. 2. Define technical terms clearly when first used. 3. Use analogies to relate complex concepts to familiar experiences. 4. Provide visual support for difficult concepts. 5. Include examples that illustrate abstract principles. 6. Connect technical information to practical implications. Remember that simplification doesn't mean oversimplification. You can make information accessible without sacrificing accuracy by focusing on what's most relevant to your audience's needs and decisions. Let's discuss another critical aspect of environmental reports: tone and language. Environmental issues can be sensitive, particularly when reporting on impacts, compliance problems, or controversial projects. The most effective environmental reports maintain objectivity without appearing detached or unconcerned, accuracy without overwhelming technical language, transparency about limitations and uncertainties, balance in presenting both positive and negative findings, constructive framing focused on improvement and solutions.
What about situations where we're reporting on compliance violations or negative environmental impacts? How do we maintain credibility while not alarming stakeholders unnecessarily?
That's an excellent question. When reporting on negative findings, the key principles are transparency, context, and action orientation. Be forthright about issues. Attempting to minimize or hide problems damages credibility. Provide context about the significance and extent of the issue. Explain contributing factors without making excuses. Focus on corrective actions and preventive measures. Demonstrate commitment to improvement and compliance. If we had tried to downplay or obscure negative findings in environmental reports, we would have undermined trust with regulators and stakeholders. Finally, let's discuss quality control for environmental reports. Given their technical nature and potential legal implications, environmental reports require rigorous review before publication. An effective review process typically includes 1. Technical review by subject matter experts to verify accuracy. 2nd, compliance review to ensure regulatory requirements are met. 3rd, editorial review for clarity, consistency, and readability. 4th, management review for alignment with organizational positions. 5. Final quality check for completeness and format compliance.
How do we handle situations where technical accuracy and management preferences conflict? For example, when management wants to present findings in a more positive light.
This is a delicate balance that many environmental professionals face. The key is to maintain integrity while finding constructive ways to address concerns.
Focus discussions on accuracy and supportable conclusions. Distinguish clearly between facts, interpretations, and recommendations. Offer alternative phrasings that maintain accuracy while addressing concerns. Explain potential risks of misrepresentation or overstatement. Suggest adding context or explanations rather than changing findings.
Remember that your professional credibility depends on the accuracy and integrity of your reports. If we had compromised on fundamental accuracy to please management, we would have undermined our professional responsibilities and potentially created legal risks. To summarize our discussion, effective environmental reports
Are structured to serve multiple audiences through layered content, present data with appropriate context and visualization, balance technical accuracy with accessibility, maintain an objective, transparent, and constructive tone. Undergo rigorous quality control before publication.
If you implement these principles in your environmental reporting, you'll create documents that not only fulfill compliance requirements, but also drive better environmental decision-making and performance. Are there any questions before we move to our practical exercises?